Greta, we're going to dive on in if you're ready.
Yeah, go on.
So I got a question for you that I want to start out with. And so, out of all the sports you could have chosen to do, why did you choose running?
I think it's kind of happened by accident. In school, there was an opportunity to represent school. While I was in school, there was an opportunity to run for school. It was kind of low key race, and we were as a family quite sporty. So I was as a child that kind of person that's like, I sure, look, I'm gonna give it a go and see what happens. So that's I put myself in that situation, and then I gave it a go, and I was like, oh, I actually enjoyed it. And then kind of bit by bit, I joined the running club here in Ireland, and then that's how I started running. So it was kind of like I did enjoy it like in the PE classes and all kind of stuff um it wasn't something out of like something really new that I didn't do. So but I feel like after that I kind of like, okay, maybe I should actually give it a go and see what happens.
I got you. So, what was it like your first time running?
um But like it was, I feel like it's different because especially when you're younger, you don't really think about consequences as much because you don't have as much experience. You don't know what certain moves gonna what outcome's gonna happen. So I think you're just more kind of ballsy and you just go out and run really hard, or you kind of being like the consequences you don't really think about it as much as when you're a bit older. I think you think about it more, but sometimes I was like, oh, I wish I would have been that runner that just began to run, because there was like you just didn't care about the consequences, which actually, and not all the cases, but in some cases actually brought some good results. As now when you experience it, think a bit more about the things that you do during the race, how hard or not too hard to go out from the very start, like, so because you know the outcome. So it's kind of, when I kind of look back, it's kind of, it was nice to be that not experienced girl that just runs and then looks at the outcome.
I hear you. Well, do you have like a cherished memory from like your early running days that kind of brings a smile to your face when you think about it?
um do uh I don't know. I think they all, I think geez, that's a very good question. um I don't know. I think, we all as an athlete happy when we kind of like the easiest way is to get a smile on our face when we run like a good race. So I would say like if we run a PB, or if we win or come second or third, depending on the race. So or I feel like maybe knowing that, like, I think when you gave it all, to be honest, let's be honest, when when you gave it all, and if you ran a PB, personal best, then I would say that always brings a smile on their faces.
That's I can understand that. Running a personal best is always nice to do, no matter what your sport is,
Mm.
or if you lift a personal best. So, what was it? Can you take us back to the moment where you did your first personal best and how you felt?
Oh yeah, I remember. Yeah, so it was basically, I think it was my first 1500 meters, and I got to pay one of the girls to pace me through, like, just to try and kind of get those times down. Oh, it was very painful. It was very painful. And that pain, like, it's a different now. Do you know what I mean? When you kind of go through after this many years, like the pain is there, but it's a different pain. I was like, this one is just pure, like you're not as fit, and like especially the third lap is like, Jesus, just hold on. So it's actually, that's what I remember. And not in any bad way, to be honest, but like that's where you just kind of like just hold on for one that lap, and then basically the last lap is just, like, it's the last lap, but the middle one is, it's always the hardest.
Yeah. So you're a 1500-meter runner, correct?
Yeah.
Awesome. Why did you pick that over like the other short or long distances?
I would say I would be well, I'm not as fast enough to do a 800, definitely not. Like my Twitch fiber is not existent. You kind of but I do have a bit of a speed for 15, and like at 1500 meters, you can like if you have endurance, that actually is the majority of the distance, endurance. Um, so I would say 1500 meters, and also because it's a para event, uh, in my for my class. So that's another reason why. But I would also like some of the races. I would also like I would do 800 meters to improve my 15, or I would do 3K. I could like the mileage that we do would allow me to do a 5K. I ran recently a 10K. So like my main event for now is like 1500 meters. But with the training that we do, if I wanted to, I could stick with 3K, 5K, 10K if I want to.
Okay, awesome. So you were mentioning about kind of your earlier experience with running kind of in PE class. And I know you mentioned in an interview that a PE teacher kind of convinced you to join the running club. So how was that and what was that like and what impact has it had on your athletic career?
Well, I do think that it's people that come into our lives like unexpectedly steers us to a certain direction if we choose to follow that direction. So I think he was great because he was the one that after that community race he was, oh Greta, like would you be interested in para sports? So I feel like or joining the club. So I feel like he gave the knowledge that I wasn't aware of, and also probably I came to Ireland, you know what I mean. I still there was so much that I didn't know about the country and how things work. So it was like like all the knowledge that he gave me about it, and it's like, okay, Greta, this is the opportunity that is there, and I said, why not? And I looked into it, and then I joined the club and kind of just I said I'm gonna give it a go. And like you never know what can happen. You know, it could have went either way. I could have, decided that it's not for me. But it it seems that it was.
I'd say it's worked out so far. You've won a couple medals and you're going all over doing races. So that's really awesome. And then you did mention that, having someone kind of believe in you is really good. And I noticed that you are actually helping out with, I believe it's the DARE program that you're an ambassador for. Would you mind
Yeah,
telling us about
because
that?
yeah, so it's a school program for kids. It's an Olympic school program where we go to schools and um, we kind of encourage kids to dream big, but also we kind of want to, talk about sport and what it's like, what our sport journeys and what it's like to go for your goals, and like we talk it from our sport background and for dream like we talk about our dreams in sport, but like we also want to, for my personal experience and the way I try to kind of spread the messages that it's not necessarily a sport as such, that it's every goal that a child has and that he just needs to work towards it. Sometimes it's going to be disappointing, but just keep at it. So I think that's very important. And like even though we're going from the sports perspective, that also we want to encourage for kids to be active and for their to have healthy lifestyles as much as possible and discipline that comes with sports, but also that it doesn't have to be a sport. If a child is not a sport, it could be music, it could be art, whatever they're passionate about.
Awesome. That's really great that you're involved in stuff like that. Would you be able to share like maybe a heartwarming moment you've kind of had with a young athlete that really reignited your belief and then transformed the power of sports?
I think it's funny because it's the question that kids ask. So it's very interesting the way you always like you most of the times you give the same presentation to kids. and you try to relate as much as possible, so you change details or like in order to kind of relate, because there's age differences and so on. But it's the questions that kids ask you, which like kind of like, oh wow, like okay, because they're like, why are you doing this? And you're like, okay, like because we go as an athlete, we're all about performance, we're all about running, training, but sometimes it's a nice reminder, like they ask you like, why are you doing this? And like kids, they're amazing because they're so straightforward, there's no filter, they're going to ask you what they actually think, and that's very nice. So then, and also another thing is like when you go through the story, so let's say if I tell them my story and now I started running, and then it reminds me of like, okay, so that's how it all came about. So I feel like um it kind of works both ways. And but I think the questions that kids ask, or like they're so smart, and then they, you know what I mean, and then they make me think, and I was like, right. So I think for me, that's, I always enjoy that part. I really enjoy kids asking questions, and about the sports and reasons why I'm in it, and what motivates me, or like they share their own experiences and their own, in sports, especially if there's some runners in the class, then you would kind of have a discussion about it. So I think that's, for me, is the most, to be honest, the most favorite part of the visit.
So speaking of questions, have you ever been asked like a really crazy out of the box question from a kid you've been working with?
Mm, was I? Not, to be honest, not really. Like you always, those questions where I would always be surprised when kids ask me. It's like, oh, like, but some, these are the kids that are kind of like real smart ones. They're like, why are you representing Ireland and not Lithuania? So that's the question one. I was like, oh, because it's a fair question to be asked. Not all kids ask that, but like the really kind of, I feel like the really ones that are like very straightforward and eye for detail, they do. So I was like, okay, so let's, how do I make this as simple as possible and the most kind of like clear as possible? So I feel like that is one of the questions that I was like, right, because you understand why even the grown-ups, some would ask, some wouldn't really want to go into much detail, but the kids, they just go for it if they want to know the answer to it.
So we're talking about kids. What are you? Do you mentor any specific like adaptive athletes that might be younger or on your team right now?
Uh, no, to be honest, no. But because like currently I'm a selfish athlete, so I'm more. There's so much time that needs to give into the sport. Like I do. Like if there's any questions, or like if I can help in any way, like I do. But there's no, in any way, specific way, not at the moment. No, especially when we have like a year as this year, when it leads to up to Paris, like that is the main focus.
Okay.
But like when I
Um,
retire, maybe, but not at the moment, no.
I was gonna say, looking forward, do you have any kind of like dreams or aspirations for like your athletic career or beyond, or what kind of legacy you want to leave for future generations?
Um, I didn't really thought about it. I do believe in giving back to sport in some sort of capacity. I am aware, and I was like, if I can, if let's say there is some like visually impaired athlete that, let's say, wants to do athletics, like I'm more than helpful. Like I'm more than happy to help as much as I can. Um, and I'm not sure in what capacity yet. Maybe, yeah, not sure. I'm just like I'm not. I thought I'm gonna think it, but at the moment I don't know in what capacity. But I do want to at some point, and I do, and I really believe in it, because I am surrounded by people and coaches that give so much back after they retire, and there were so many people that gave me so much. when they were in sport, or when they retired, or during while they were they athlete, like were they still competing. So I think it's so important to share our experiences um and our journey, and like all these things. I think they're very important. Um, so hopefully when I retire and then I'll have more knowledge to share, I'll be able to do so. But at the moment, I'm not sure exactly how is that gonna happen, but hopefully with time I'll figure something out.
I gotcha. So, what advice would you give to maybe a kid that's maybe not sure if they should try sports, whether they're adaptive or not adaptive? Do you have like a specific story you share and advice you give them, or what's kind of your approach to that?
Well, I just always say to try everything and not be afraid of the outcome. So that would be my thing. It's like just try it, and don't worry about it. And what happens happens. And I think the most important is to try as many things, like as many sports as you can, or as many different things, and just find the one that you love, because that is important thing in sport, especially. Like you have to love it, because if you don't, then like, oh, it's gonna be so hard. Like it's very hard to perform. It's very hard to last in sport for long if you don't know what you do. And I think it applies to everything what we do. So I would say that would be my advice, just to try as many things and find the thing that they love, and that they stick with it. And they're gonna be surprised what outcomes might come up out of it. But I think the key is just not to be afraid, and just try.
That's some great advice, especially I'm sure the kids you work with are very appreciative that you take the time to talk to them and mentor them and stuff like that. But you mentioned kind of trying everything. So going beyond your running skills, are there like some secret talents or hidden passions that you have that your fans probably don't know about?
Well, I wouldn't call it I don't know about like outside sport, because sport plays such a huge role. But I always be in that kind of person that I was like, okay, we're just gonna give it a go and see what happens, like with education, like you know what I mean, like all I will like I would do like I have like two master's degrees, because I was like, okay, I'm gonna give it a go, and like it's gonna be useful in the future, and because I found it interesting. like what if there's opportunity that presents itself that I find it interesting, I'll give it a go. I'm kind of like I would like my gut is just like, okay, like I feel like I need to do this. So I think like I am like that. I don't think that I have something like anything specific that I'm like passionate about, or like a part sport, like traveling, or like keeping I would say that would be, or books also would be that kind of, that's something that I would do. But I wouldn't think that I is like a talent. I don't think that I have anything specific like that, but I just kind of try to do bits and bobs if the opportunity presents itself, and if I feel like I want to do it, you know. So I would say like I do believe like in self-development, and that is very important. And I do believe that we're not just an athlete, and that we're a person first. So I would say I look at it from that lens.
Okay. So you just said you have two master's degrees.
Yeah.
How is that schooling and what are they in?
So I have first master's in business management, and then second master's in sports psychology. So I was very lucky that I was able to split and do it part-time, both masters. So that's kind of where some of my time went, but it was a great balance between the sport and education. And I think, you know, like we have to take, as an athlete, we are very lucky the way we have opportunities to do that. Um, and yeah, and I think that both of them were very interesting. Business management is from the business perspective, and business and sport can relate really closely. And then when we look from sports psychology, well, that's we all, it's kind of very clear. I think that psychology in sports plays a huge role, and mental skills and our mind is really important in order to achieve the wanted outcome, performance, and how to deal with failure and all these things. So I find it very interesting as an athlete, and I was like, okay, I want to just kind of dive in a bit more into it, and yeah, and I did, and I'm very happy to kind of gain a bit of knowledge on that subject.
Yeah, sports psychology is very interesting, especially when it comes to performance, because a lot of research now is being conducted into the mentality of athletes. And so, kind of having that background helps you. Was there something you learned in your master's from sports psychology that you apply every day and maybe kind of educate your fellow athletes on as well?
I think what I definitely learned is that as an athlete, our cultural and or the way we wired is like, okay, we're tough, we're gonna push it through. And I was so much like that, and I still am. It's something that you kind of need to I need to be very aware of. So I think when I started the sports psychology and when we started like learning about it, there's kind of and then you start reading research papers and they're like, oh my God, it makes so much sense because well, like as an artist, we're tough. So, we don't complain. We do the training, mentally, like sometimes it doesn't matter. Like we're gonna push through this. And I'm that kind of like person as well. So I was like, I think majority athletes are, but then you're kind of like when you look back to your like races and your performances, I'm like, okay, the reality is that some of the times you won't be able to push through this, and that is okay. But if you do want to push through this, you're doing it with certain tools that are there. And I like sports psychologists, it's okay. Like it doesn't make you weak, but like it actually gives you the knowledge how to deal with your mind. So that's something that I had to learn because I was like, sports psychology before I went to like masters, like sports psychology, like it's mine. You just suck it up and you do it. Like that's the mentality that is. It can be hard. You push through. But then you're kind of like looking a bit deeper into it, and then you're like, okay, like yes, like that's okay to accept the tough times, and it's okay to accept the good and the bad because that's what sport is. But then you're like, okay, like is there anything like is there's so many also those little things that actually can make things a bit easier for you or deal with them better or even perform better before like or make you feel better before the race. So there's like it doesn't have to be all like oh push through because like mental side is equally like body, do you know what I mean? So if your mental side is fatigued, like if your body fatigued, like there's not like you're gonna push through this, but the outcome that you want is not gonna you're not gonna get the outcome. So for me, that was really I was like, oh yeah, that's okay. So then I kind of like was more open to then work with sports psychologists, and then like, okay, yes, it was very fun also because then you have a chat to her, and I was like, yes, that's exactly what I read. So what do you think about this? So it's very interesting because you have your own knowledge, and then you also working with a professional that he is in that sphere and worked for so many years with different athletes, and they're like, okay, so we can look at this from different perspective, and you can have those debates and learn, which I think is very interesting.
Oh, okay, yeah. So diving deeper into the psychology of sports, did you learn anything that really surprised you, or that you just found totally intriguing, and are like going down a rabbit hole of exploring that?
um I think I think there was few things. So I feel like I really found it interesting the element of overtraining, and I think like athletes overtraining and how that can impact not the body and the mind. Like that was it's more what was more appealing to me, and like kind of reading about that part or also like finding that optimal performance um were like where you're kind of like ready to like when you're like find what when athletes talk about like okay like I performed so I can't remember what was happening, I just like everything felt so perfect and like everything felt so easy, and like that's like the like I felt like in a dream, and then I got this massive personal best. So that's just like optimal performance. So like where your body and your mind are in sync, and like when that happens, then you get the best outcome out of yourself as an athlete. But in most of the cases, like it's actually really, we all as an athlete want to get that, but it's a very hard one to do because like it's all about your like mental zone and where you are and how to, it's like arousal levels, that's how we call it. That you're not too hyped or you're not too calm, and that you're in the present. um so that's where the mental skills come in to actually be able to reach uh that that sense of you know like performing in the moment. But it's a hard one to achieve because that means that your body needs to be ready to do it, and your mind needs to be ready to do it. So sometimes your mind could be ready but your body might not, or your body might be ready and your mind it might not. So there's also other variables that come into play, but that is the basically aim for majority athletes. And the sports psychology, that's where it kind of dives into that peak performance, that performance when athletes just you know like they just get in the moment, and they get those great races or great performances. And I remember, and as an athlete, I think majority of the athletes had that moment when they kind of like get this massive PB, and you're like, I wasn't even in pain. Like, how is this possible? Because you were just in the moment and everything was perfect. It's very hard to get, but that's the one of the elements where sports psychology comes into play, and where sports psychology tries to help with, let's say, mental tools for the athletes to try and achieve that that level because that's unique for every athlete. Like some athletes like, and it depends also on the event that you do. So let's say if you do, let's say, 100 meters, like you need to be like ready to rock. It's going to be explosive, whatever. But if you run, let's say, 10,000 meters, that's again going to be completely different, because then you need to be calm, you need to be collected, you need to be in control. It's going to be a long way. So like there's a lot of variables to look, and also depends on person's personality. It depends on what makes a person to kind of like be ready to compete. Some like to be a bit calmer, some like to be hyped and ready to go. Like there's so many variables, and it's unique to every individual. And that's where I feel like sports psychology comes in, and it's more just giving an awareness to athlete, and like just giving the tools to use them. And when the athlete know what he needs to do, it just becomes easier. And it doesn't mean that you're always gonna get it, but you're gonna get it right. But at least you know what you need to do in order for you to get yourself in the best possible position.
So it sounds like you're describing what we call the flow state. Would that be kind of a good synopsis? Okay. Have you ever had a race or a moment where you entered the flow state?
Yeah, definitely.
Can you describe that for us?
Um, it definitely was when I got my one of my PBs. It was probably like um 3 years ago now. Yeah, I remember it was, I think that was that season actually. Two races were like, I just like, you just, I didn't expect it. I remember I was after Europeans, and I was like, oh my God, I was like, before the race, like, geez, I feel like I'm a bit flat. I was like, Jesus, I don't think that I'm gonna get it. I was like, okay, I was like, it doesn't matter. Okay, just do it. Just go and just run it. So I remember just like uh just kind of like starting the race, and I was like, okay, I'm just gonna start passing people. And I remember just kept passing people, and I was like, okay, I'm getting closer to these girls. They actually, in my head, I was like, I remember I'm running it. I was like, they're quite fast. Okay, but I'm gonna keep going. So I'm like approaching, going closer and closer to them. And I remember crossing the line, and I'm feeling good. But in my head, I was kind of like, I don't think that I got the time. I thought that like my time, I was like, oh, I think it was so slow. Like in my head, it's like, oh, I think it was so slow. And then it actually was my personal best. And I was like, wow, like it was so unexpected. It didn't feel hard. I don't know. It just felt like, and it passed so quickly as well. You're kind of like, it just was, it's very hard to, it's actually a thing that is very hard to describe, but you're like, it just feels easy. Like it just, in the moment that when you compete, everything just feels easy. I feel like that's how I'm going to describe it. It just feels easy. And then just
So it's just kind of
just
like your
run this PB like.
so would you say it's kind of like your body, mind, and soul just like came together as one, and you don't feel anything, and you're just solely enveloped in the moment?
Yeah, you're just going, you're just running, and you're just like going. And that's, I remember just passing person by person. That's all what I did. Just, I was like, well, that's what I'm gonna do. I said in my head, because I didn't concern about the time, I didn't concern about the outcome. I was like, okay, like I'm just gonna race this. And then I remember just like passing person, just like, you know what I mean? I didn't even do like, I can't even remember if I did like race. I didn't even follow the, like I didn't know what pace we were going. I remember, was there no clocks or something? I don't know. I didn't even look at that. I just went like that. And it just happened. And like but it's like, and you could ask any athlete, it's a very hard thing to explain. You just have to kind of like experience, because now we're kind of like flow state, and then people's like, I definitely know what you mean. But like people who did sport, they definitely had that in the in their sport. Like it definitely did happen, especially when it comes to runners. And but yeah, it just happens, and you can't explain it.
Probably the best feeling in the world, huh?
Mm. Just, yeah,
Yeah.
it is, yeah.
So speaking of, well, we're talking about sports psychology and performance. So
Mm.
do you, I know a lot of athletes. I wouldn't call it superstitions per se, but some of them have like very, what you would say, quirky rituals or specific rituals they have before performing or going to do their race. Do you have anything like that that you have to do before every race?
When I was younger, I think I kind of did. I was probably maybe specific on, but now not really, because what I especially learned that works for me as an athlete, I don't want to be in any way driven, but I don't want to be tied to certain things, because what I learned is there's things that you cannot control. And I like to have, I don't want to tie to something. I don't want something to go wrong. And it's like, oh my God, I didn't do this. So now I'm not going to run well or whatever. Like, I don't want to be tied to it. So personally, like for me, it's the one thing that like I like to have music before the races. I think that's majority thing for the athletes. But a part of that, I know I try to not have anything specific, because I don't want to be tied. I don't want that my certain action would like put me in a mental element that's like, oh my God, I didn't do this, so I'm not ready, or like I won't run good. Like no, I don't want to kind of put myself in that situation, that I was like, well, as long as I have my music, as long as I have my like you know access to good food, let's say before the race, especially when we're traveling to different places. um if I have a good sleep, like, I have my spikes, I have my kit that I wear most usually, like, that's it. Like, so I'm kind of trying to be very open and not tie myself to anything specific.
Okay, so you mentioned music. Is there like a specific song you have to listen to, or is it maybe just a specific genre that kind of gets you mentally prepared for the race?
Yeah, no, to be honest, it's very dependent on the race. It's very dependent also how I feel before the race, because that's why we're talking about the levels, and every athlete has certain levels that is feels the best to perform. So for me, it's like at certain, let's say if it's 1500 meters, like I want to be a bit calmer for it, and not too kind of aggressive. So then I would probably listen something more kind of calmer. I think music is it's a great way to control these things. Or like let's say if it's 800 meters where you kind of need to be a bit more aggressive. Then you probably would, listen to something more upbeat and you're like, okay, I'm ready to go here. I need to hit it hard. So it depends. So I don't really, it's more for me, the upbeat of the music, like calmer or more kind of more faster, kind of like upbeat. So for me, like that elements would be, I would say, important. Not like I wouldn't kind of stick with the certain song or anything. It's like basically how I feel on the day and depending on the race.
Okay. So your mood kind of determines and the race determines like what you're going to listen to. Okay. So going back to food, is there like a snack that you have to have or a snack that you always kind of have at hand for whether it's races or practices?
Oh, jellies are always in my bag. Jellies always. Then also I would say a croissant. I would always have a croissant before the race, like kind of in my bag as well, because sometimes it just you're not that hungry. Well, first of all, we need carbs, and then second of all, like you might not feel that hungry, but you kind of want a snack and like a plain croissant, like it's kind of like, or like sugar with all with the sugar. Actually, our diet is so bad on the race days, but I think those kind of elements, something very plain, like so, like a croissant, let's say a sugary, like sports drink, like we have here, Lucozade. That's what we would take, and let's say jellies. But jellies would be like even sometimes before the session as well, just have a bit of sugar.
Okay. Do you have a favorite like cheat day meal or dessert that you like to go to?
I do have to be honest, like I don't really have cheat days as such because the reason I was like, where I'm going with this, but the reason being, like I run during winter time so many miles. So like I would run like 100-mile week. So like for me, like every day can be a cheat day because like I need the calories. Like when you come to this, when you run a lot of miles, that comes like the food is not food, it's fuel. So obviously you look at it healthy, you take you need to take all the vegetables and all that kind of stuff, but sometimes that on its own is just not enough because there's only so much you can actually consume as a person. So you just have to, like, that's why I was like, if you want to have chocolate, you're gonna have chocolate. If you want to have a cake, have a cake, have a pancake. There's not an issue because you run so much, but it only applies if you run a lot. And this is like if you run 100 miles a week, like you have to go, like even by eating that, you're gonna lose weight, So, but that's only applies to these elements. It's not always the case. When I like was running less, then obviously you would have less, you just less, that cheat meals. It wouldn't be that, then definitely you would have those cheat meals. You would have, okay, this is like I'm gonna treat myself. But when you run a lot of miles, you just have to consume as much as you can. Basically, that's the goal.
Okay.
I
What's
don't know if that answers the
what's your
question
mileage?
on it.
No, you're good. That's hey, that's fine. I liked it. Because you're not. I mean, you're right. If you're burning so many calories, especially running, and a lot of mileage a week. What's your typical mileage a week, depending on whether it's winter or summer or in season, out of season?
So that's what it depends. So let's say during winter time it was 100 miles, basically 100. Like it could vary. One week it could be like 104. It could be other week it could be 96. But like 100-mile weeks, that's what it would be during winter time. And then summertime now we're actually coming to racing season, so it's probably going to drop around 70 miles, because like especially if you do 1500 meters, like the more miles you do, it kind of slows you down a bit, so you kind of need to be fresh but still kind of and remain fit because there's going to be a long season ahead. So I feel like 70 miles is that middle ground because you want to feel fresh, and with 100 miles, like it can really vary, like where like some weeks you're actually, oh, I'm fine, and then other weeks you're kind of, oh my God, like, and you can't really with 100 miles you can't do fast stuff. It's just really hard, like you can't. So in order to kind of start doing a bit faster stuff to prepare for the races and kind of maintain that and do the faster paces, like you need to drop the mileage. So I feel like 70 miles should be good for the season.
That's still a lot, 70 miles a week. That's good.
Well, but you do feel the difference, because there is like 30 miles differential. So then you can kind of, it does for like when you do 100 miles for like a winter, then it's like, okay, it's kind of like feels weird. It's kind of like, oh, it's so unusual. But like you kind of need to trust the process and kind of, allow your body to absorb and, take all the training that you did and be ready to race.
I understand. Do you have any recovery strategies that you always utilize that help you to kind of stay fresh and ready?
No, not to be like I'm very like I'm kind of like various like you need to do the main things well. So the sleep, I feel like it's always like just to make sure that you sleep enough. Track track the heart rate, HRV, they kind of dictate that like quite well. And sleep quality. So I feel like that's the main things, and the food as well. I know I kind of mentioned there is a fuel, you kind of like use like you have there's all the carbs going out and all the kind of stuff during the 100 miles, but you still like that still means that you will try to like 90% of your food still needs to be good quality, and you still need to make sure that you get all these things. And another thing is I feel you need to have something outside sport that you enjoy to do. Is that like, I know, reading a book, watching series, meeting friends? Like I think that's very important because sometimes you can get a bit consumed and like mentally tired. So I think it's important to have something to allow your body mentally to recover and be ready to go. So I think that is very important and definitely needs to be, also one of the priorities.
That's some good advice. I appreciate that. Let's see. So when you do you I take it that you do probably some long training runs, like long slow distance. Do you prefer to do those on the track, or do you love to get out and like go run trails, go run the road? What's kind of your preference?
Um, it really depends. So let's say if we do like track, if we run, let's say, Ks, for example. So we probably would do it on a track because we can measure the times that we do. But let's say if we do threshold, which is a bit like we do it a bit for longer, so then we do it in a park. So I think we have a very nice kind of variety in our training that we kind of keep. We don't do everything on the track and we don't do everything on the road. And also when we do our easy runs, that's where we go on the roads a lot, or on the grass. So I think like it's important to have that variety, for just make it easier on the body. I feel like the grass and the not always running on the concrete, or also like not always running on the track. So I think those kind of, I think, variety for the body to keeping it healthy, but also kind of exposing it to different surfaces, I think it's good.
I got you. Do you have a favorite place in Ireland you like to kind of go and run?
So I'm actually very lucky. I'm living beside this kind of beautiful St. Anne's Park at the moment, or so we have like a park, but then we also have this kind of seafront. So there's a lot of choice, like because I live in a city, but we're very lucky because we have a lot of parks around. So I can actually have so much choice to run, where to run, and kind of change a bit. But at the moment, I mostly my runs I do in St. Anne's Park, which is it's quite a big park, and it's beautiful, and it kind of brings you out to seafront, which is can be a bit windy, but it's nice.
Do you do you enjoy kind of some of those runs going by yourself to like maybe help you problem solve or just kind of get away, or do you use runs like that as well other than just training?
Oh yeah, I love runs, and I usually like I only probably do one run with people. That would be the long run. But then like all the runs I love, yeah, I'll do them on my own because I feel like it's great. It's like my own time. And I do, yeah. Like if I have any issue, I was like, okay, I need to go for a run. And I like the thinking element. Uh Absolutely. I definitely do that. Like and I like, like if there's again music that I want to listen to, or I don't really listen to podcasts to be honest when I'm running. Like I kind of tried, but it doesn't really like it kind of my attention kind of goes away on different places like around the place, so it doesn't really work. But like the music or sometimes just going without music or like yeah, it's definitely my when I want to solve an issue, definitely that's what I do. I think it helps loads.
Yeah. What's the what kind of problem have you solved recently going for your runs? If that's
I
not getting
don't
too
know.
personal.
I was like, no, no, it's not personal. I'm just thinking what problem. I don't know, like it's more like I don't know if I'm gonna get a solution. You know what I mean? Not necessarily I'm getting the solution on that run, but I analyze it. So there's a lot of analysis going on. And then, I don't know if I'll stick with it. It's very hard to kind of give you an example. Like, for example, like if I, let's say, feel like at start of the season and I feel a bit tired, and then I went for a run and it's like, okay, what do I think I need to do? Like, okay, do we need to like decrease mileage? Do I need to kind of look into my sleep? Like even things like that, even if that means that like me thinking about, let's say, um, even think about the races, for example, like this morning, let's say so this weekend I'll run an 800 meters. And then this morning I went on the run and it's like, okay, so this will be an 800 meters. It's like, I wonder what would be the best way for me to run it. And you're like, but then you kind of need to like it depends. And you're kind of just having this discussion with yourself. Okay, it depends what pace you're going to go through. And you're kind of like, and like, for example, for me, it kind of works even like look at different races scenarios. So I can actually run, what I mean, in my head, I'm kind of like, like I could run it this way, or I can go and run it this way. And like, even imagery, like I can run, and then in my mind, I'm kind of okay, but I would imagine like how how the race might unfold. And I did it many times. I think it's kind of works a bit of multitasking, but it kind
That's fair. Yeah, I do like to run occasionally, and that does help me kind of like put things in perspective or to solve, I guess, problems or think about things. And going in, you said some visualization. Do you have like a visualization practice that you do?
yeah, I think it's important. And I think majority of the athletes do that unconsciously in some es elements. But yeah, I think for me, like, and I'm not a kind of like I can like it's not like like some people kind of like to like sit down and take time for it and all the kind of stuff. But like for me, it's something could be like a few minutes, like even just like I don't know, while I drink my tea, for example. And I was like, okay, like in my mind, like how you kind of like try to like put yourself in the race scenario and kind of just okay, how would I kind of feel like? And there's different techniques of visualization, and there's so many layers that you can go through. It takes a lot of practice, but let's say usually for me, like I would see myself as if I, let's say, if I am looking at like race live stream. Do you know what I mean? So that's how my visualization works. So I was like, okay, like as I see myself making those certain moves. So like yes, I would do that. Sometimes I'm kind of like need to be more aware, and I'm doing it like as like okay, like I'm kind of more conscious, and sometimes it kind of happens naturally if my mind sometimes just wanders there. So but yeah, I think it's very important, and I think it just gives you I think it gives you confidence because you kind of have certain scenarios where you know how the race might go, and then you're not panicking because like, oh, actually I've seen this. So it's like going through the scenarios, plan A, plan B, plan C, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but yeah.
I gotcha. I think the key factor in your visualization is drinking tea. I think that's the winner right there.
Absolutely, that's very calming.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite tea, or how do you make your tea in a specific way? I asked that because I drink tea every night, so now I'm kind of like, let's talk about tea.
Oh yeah, yeah. I love mint tea. I think mint tea is great. So that's definitely mint tea is my or chamomile.
Okay.
That's my two
Do you
favorites. Yeah.
do you put anything in it like honey or lemon juice or anything
Yeah.
like
Oh
that?
yes,
Or
honey. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Lithuanian honey. Yeah, definitely goes
ooh,
in there. Yeah.
okay, awesome. So now you are originally from Lithuania, correct? Or you were born there
Yes, I'm
and then
originally
moved to
from
Ireland?
Lithuania. Mm.
Mm. So how was there like a culture shock when you moved from Lithuania to Ireland?
Yeah, like it was. I always kind of like I would think that like it takes around 3 years to kind of like fully adapt. Well, that's how long it took for me, basically, just to feel kind of like at home. Um, it was culturally shocked, but then I was lucky because I had like my brother and my sister, and we were in this together. So it kind of like really, so it's kind of was easier. But yeah, I feel like a couple of years also like, the language, the things of like the sense of humor, all these cultural things, every culture has what is acceptable, what is not acceptable, like how people communicate with each other. There's a lot of kind of elements that comes into like getting to know a different culture. So I feel like that definitely was kind of like something to learn, and it definitely took time, but sure, look, I'm here now 13 years, so so I think I learned as much as I could at this point.
Do you have any like family traditions from Lithuania that you kind of carried with you guys to Ireland and that you continue today?
Yeah, I think we carried all of them. So let's say the Christmas, so we celebrate Christmas Eve, and then let's say Easter, we decorate the eggs. I think like, all these kind of like a bit, what else? There anything else? I think those two would be the kind of big ones. I think the biggest kind of things that we do, and I think the rest of the stuff is kind of very similar. It doesn't really didn't change that much.
Do you guys have a big family like tradition when it comes to like Christmas or Easter? Since you mentioned those holidays.
Yeah, so I like like in Lithuania we celebrate Christmas Eve. That's our big, so that's where we begin celebrating our Christmas. As in Ireland, it's not really the case. And then Easter, yeah, so Easter, our thing would be, just have a lunch, kind of big family lunch, with eating eggs, not chocolate eggs, like actual decorated, we decorate the eggs day a night before, and then we kind of, as a family, we gather and we have this big lunch thing. So that's another thing that like we always do, as I'd say probably in Ireland, that wouldn't necessarily be the case. So yeah.
Yeah, gotcha. So it sounds like you and your family kind of are really close and get along pretty well, which is good.
Yeah, yeah, we try to.
Try to. Uh oh.
No,
And
no, to be
then I
honest,
was
they're
also
great.
reading.
I love them.
I won't tell him. I promise. Um, so I read somewhere that your aunt actually used to play basketball in the Lithuania, correct?
Yeah, she did. She played for NBA, yes.
Did that kind of have any impact on you and your athletic career as well? Kind of watching her do her sport?
Absolutely. I think she's a great inspiration for me. I feel like it kind of she keeps me accountable because she achieves so much. So I was like, Jesus, you have to keep it going, Greta. So I think that definitely, I think like she was, and she's still to this day, like she is one of the best. Well, now she doesn't play anymore. She's a senior coach, but she's still like, she's still known as one of the best um basketball players. And like, and I think that's how we know, like in Lithuania, like if you say like my Streimikyte, my surname, like in Lithuania, it's like, oh, are you related to? And I was like, yes, yes, I am. So I like it is a big, when it was a big thing in the family, and then it kind of even gives a bit of identity, saying, "Oh, my family is sporty because she's one person in that side of the family that did so well." And it's like, yeah, yeah, but our family is very sporty, so it kind of naturally, I feel like gives that. I don't want to like it's not a pressure. It's kind of that identity of like what sport means and how much she achieved. Like so, yeah. So it's the so I feel like yeah, she kind of definitely plays a huge role. Like to kind of like okay, Grab, like yeah, you need to do your best for yourself first, but also like for the family because she did so well and like in the best ways. And also like I remember my granny would tell me the stories. There was times where she didn't want to play. Her knees were sore for playing. And she wanted to quit. And you know what I mean? Those hard stories that like and that she still remained. And and she was so good. So I think it's yeah, I kind of really admire her for that. So
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that story. I like learning about her. Appreciate that. Um, so besides your PE teacher and your aunt, is there anyone else, whether it's in the adaptive or non-adaptive community, that's really impacted your running career as well?
to be honest, I think there's a lot of people. I think there's a lot of people. I feel like people play a huge role in sport, and we all say, oh, you put in the training and you are where you are because of you. But I don't think that it's true. I think it's the people that we surround ourselves with, and I think that plays a huge role what we achieve in sport. And um, I think like that's because you can't do it on your own. Like nobody can. It's just the sport is too big of a roller coaster, of successes and failures. Well, I don't want to call them failures, but like things won't go well and things don't go as well. So I feel like to have people there, like in terms of that people that are in your environment, I think that is the key. But like it's in general in life, like you don't need to look so close as sport. You can like in a life in general. I think the more positive people that are gonna support you, that you're gonna support them, you're gonna have the happier life you're gonna have. So I think that is the key, regardless or we are in sport or not. And I'm very lucky to have those people, to have a great family, to have great friends, to have great coaches around me. So I can only say that I'm very lucky.
That's awesome. Um, so I know that the adaptive athletic community is very close. So could you kind of tell us your personal opinion and perspectives on the adaptive community and what it means to you?
Um, well, I don't know, to be honest. I think you asked the wrong person because I am not really in that community. I'm not really because I train like I'm in the para team. I compete like I'm competing in para sport. I get on well with my teammates, but I don't train with them. So every time I meet them, it's only when we go to international competition or if we have like as activities or anything that we do as a team from the sports perspective. But a part of that, I I am surrounded by able-bodied athletes. So um I was never that kind of person to be really kind of like close. Not in a bad way. It's just because I feel like it's important to look outside on, like it's important to have variety in life. So like we are we are we are the minority, so I feel like it's important to be outside, to be inside, but also outside because that's what the whole world is about you know so I kind of just, I feel like it's important to have different people from different backgrounds and not to stick just with the same people, you know, like you say, let's say adaptive communities and all kinds of stuff. So I wouldn't be in that much, if that kind of makes sense.
Okay, so you spend a lot of time with non-adaptive runners that you run with and train with. Is what it sounds like. Okay, do you feel like that kind of gives you an advantage or pushes you to be even better?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's again one of the reasons why I do train with them, because it definitely makes me better.
Okay, what would you like to see for the future of like adaptive athletics or the Paralympics?
I think that it shouldn't be. I don't think that it should be concentrated, and I don't think that should be. It should be concentrated just people, let's say, with disability in one area. I think they need to be expanded, and they need to put in the places where they're not together. Because it's great that they have their own communities, and it's great that they can support each other, and that's very good. And it still can remain that it doesn't have to be black and white, but I think it's important to have variety, and it's important to understand that like we live in a society where we are the minority, and it's important to be in that society because that gives a person with disability to show people, who don't have disability, that it's okay. It's a learning curve for both parties. So but if you're concentrated in one place and you don't see what is outside, none of the parties can learn, or like in the society, or like understand what each other person needs, or each other person's points of view. So I think it's important to be as adaptive to people, let's say, I don't know, with disability into mainstream as much as possible, and to less concentrate them only, okay, like, here's the team with, here's the runners with vision impairment, and there's no people who have or there's no athletes with a good vision. I don't think that that's right. And I'm saying this from the person that, as a person that went to school for vision impaired kids, which from one element it was good when you were a child, and it gives you a bit more time and gives you skills, but it's not good in the long run. And there has to be at some point come a time when you're just out in the society, and you just need to, work, and you need to be surrounded with people, like with in the mainstream where there's no disabilities, and you have to learn how to deal with that.
Okay, so instead of just like sticking with just your community, you think kind of surrounding yourself with other people kind of like you have, able-bodied runners and stuff like that. And so getting outside of the community, but then also giving people exposure to like the para athletes and things like that. Okay. Are you working towards any type of like, how are you personally trying to bring awareness to like the Paralympics and stuff like that?
Well, here we are. We both are now talking about the Paralympic sport.
That's
Simple,
fair. That
simple as
works.
that. Yeah, so simple as that. I don't push it. If there's an opportunity, I'll talk about it. Um, I am a para athlete, so my performances, or come as a para athlete. So I think as simple as that. I don't push it too much. I don't, um, I think my job is to be an athlete. That's my job, and whatever comes with it, to talk about para sport, I'm more than open. But as an athlete, my responsibility is to perform, and whatever that brings with it, that's what it brings with it. But so I'm kind of like, yeah, going with the performance is my priority, and then if I'll get an opportunity to talk about the para sport, or if my performance represents para sport, and allows people to learn about it, then that's great.
Awesome. Well, I do appreciate you taking the time to talk to me and share everything about what's going on and share part of your life with this. And so, one more question I have for you is what's been the pinnacle of your athletic career so far? And then conversely, what was your toughest hurdle and how'd you overcome it?
Um, my pinnacle. Oh, that's a very hard one, to be honest. Like at the moment, I don't know, I still like in my journey. So I feel like if you would ask me after 4 years when I retired, then I probably would be able to kind of tell you. But like at the moment, I'm kind of like, I don't know, I just feel like I'm still kind of just like, on my journey. And like, I don't feel like I have that kind of like final, final, because I feel like the pinnacle, if I would tell you like a pinnacle of my, I don't know, like in my career so far, it would be really hard to distinguish. I would say maybe uh I feel like maybe the first Paralympic Games, that was I would say that was a beginning to of my like athletics career in the para sport, on the biggest stage. I feel like maybe that was the big kind of stepping stone and very important one. And then the most kind of the barrier to overcome, we just kind of like learn, like, you know what I mean? Like before, like we athletes, there's gonna be a lot of performances that don't go our way. Like it's very hard to kind of like you kind of just like learn from it and you move on. So I don't think that anything like really kind of like dramatic has happened in my athletics career that I would say, oh my God, that was like really so hard. Like I feel like in general, just to kind of like accept the sport, that there's gonna be probably more failures than wins. I think that's general. But like if you can accept that and be okay with like the outcomes, getting the outcomes that you might not like, you put in the training, and like if you're okay not to achieve your expectations of the outcome of the races, then I think if you learn to do that, then it's all good.
Do you have a process for how to handle situations when you doesn't meet your expectations or the race doesn't go your way?
Yes, I have 24 hours where you have to, it doesn't matter if the race went good or went bad. So there's 24 hours where you do what you need to do from the emotional element. If you need to like cry, if you need to be sad, whatever you need to do, you need to do it, but then you have to move on. After 24 hours, even less, sometimes it depends. But let's say 24 hours is max, then you have to move on. Regardless, you need to move on and leave that behind. And that applies both to races when you did well and races when you didn't do as well.
That's really great advice. I appreciate you sharing that with us. Well, Greta, I'm all out of questions, and I appreciate your time. Is there anything you'd like to add or tell the audience or anything?
Oh no, I think you had a great variety of questions. So thank you so much. I think, yeah, I think I said everything.
Awesome. Well, thank you.